Hey, how's it going guys? It's your retro future boy Ricky Summer here, and today I've come back in time to give you my thoughts on the Satisfactory closed alpha. This video brought to you by
Chrome Stallions, Armored Mercenary Company. No job is too big.
Satisfactory is a reasonably realistic representation of exoplanet colonization efforts in the year 2085 and beyond, just with squishy, inefficient, shitty humans instead of efficient, cold, hard, calculating, superior robots.
Morning, sir. Yet another on-time delivery.
So I've been looking forward to Satisfactory for a long time, ever since I first heard about the game. I'm a huge fan of this type of game. Factorio is in fact one of my all-time favorite games. Legitimately, I love it. I've got hundreds upon hundreds of hours in that game. I don't know how many exactly because I usually play off of Steam, but it's got to be approaching 1,000 hours and I'm not tired of it yet. I just started a new map in Factorio yesterday and I'm more excited than ever to get back into it, try some new things, try some new designs, get that efficiency going, baby. Oh yes. So listen, you can imagine that Satisfactory comes along and I'm I'm brimming with patriotic mucus over here. Don't judge me. So let's get into this Satisfactory alpha review. Look, I'll be honest with you. I feel like the term review is a little heavy-handed in this case, but the YouTube algorithm loves it. So let's go. So what was I expecting to get out of Satisfactory here? Honestly, I was kind of hoping for Factorio with just a little bit of a twist, but I'm here to tell you that it is not Factorio. And at first I was very disappointed by that fact, but in hindsight, you know what? It's probably for the best. They have a similar core concept, building up a factory, setting up automation, but they tackle that from slightly different angles. In a nutshell, Factorio is like 100% automation. You do the first few things manually and then it's automation is king. The moment you have the means, the moment you have the technology, automate everything and then you do nothing on your own. Haha, let's go. But Satisfactory is a little bit different. Yes, there is automation. It encourages you to automate things. You have to automate certain things, but there's still a lot you do manually. And I'll be honest, that's not really my bag. So initially I spent about 8 to 9 hours in Satisfactory solo, just going through the first 3 tech levels, which is all that was available to us in the alpha, and building up my factory. And I'll be honest, after that time, I was kind of really super down on the game. I didn't like it. It wasn't my kind of game. There wasn't enough automation in some of the most basic elements of the factory. For example, for the first 3 tech levels, there's, as far as I can see, no way to automate the production of power. You can automate the fuel that goes into your generators, but you have to then transfer it into your generators manually, and you have to build multiple generators. So that means you have to grab the fuel, split the stacks, and put it into each generator manually. It was a nightmare, dog. I spent so much time early game just running around, groping inappropriately at bushes and trees to grab biomatter to then construct into biofuel to feed manually into my generators. I just wasn't having fun. I wasn't having fun with that. Now in contrast, my buddy Stebbles was okay with that. He kind of liked that part of the game. The fact that you still had to have some manual input. Okay. Fair enough. And at this point, let's remind ourselves that this was an alpha. Satisfactory is going to be releasing into early access in the next week or so. So while I will be making some comparisons to Factorio, just because it's the only game that I'm aware of that is anything like Satisfactory, I'm also fully aware that that comparison is unfair because they're at completely different stages of development. Factorio is approaching full release. It's been in active early access development for years at this point, and it's a very refined experience. And Satisfactory is just beginning. It's just launching into early access, so we need to keep that in mind. Alright, now speaking of my buddy Stebbles, I did end up playing a multiplayer game with him, and at this point, this is when I started enjoying the game, for 2 reasons. First, doing things with a buddy and being able to delegate tasks, especially considering how much the game makes you do manually, was so much better. I feel like this is going to be a much better game in multiplayer, and not just because every game is fun in multiplayer, not because of that. I feel like the way the game is structured now, the gameplay systems lend themselves a little bit more to having some friends with you to pick up the slack, so to speak. And secondly, I realized that I think I was playing it entirely wrong. So when I was playing solo, I was playing it like Factorio. I'm like, okay, here's my goal. I'm just gonna build my factory, get it done. I mean, there's so much space on the map that there was no space constraint. So I'm just like, all right, sprawl out there, sprawl out there. And I ended up with just a super boring factory, a super boring base that got the job done, but I was unsatisfied with it. But when I jumped in with Stebbles, older, wiser, ready to give him a hand with some things that he wasn't too familiar with, I'm like, hey, yo, let's build up. And yo, that's when the whole game opened up for me. We built this ridiculous factory with 2 levels and conveyor belts going all over the place attached to the walls. It was kind of disgusting and beautiful at the same time. So let's get back to my solo game for a second. So I did get to the end of the available tech tree in the alpha, Tech 3. I did get the ability to automate power, which was fantastic. I was so excited for that. It was a big old nightmare manually managing my power up to that point. So I got access to a coal power plant. So I'm looking for coal. And man, trying to find coal was... Why have you done this to me? So the closest coal deposit from my starting area was essentially on a floating island. So I had to build a bridge to it, which I wasn't crazy about, and then build a truck and automate it pulling the coal from that mine all the way over to my main base to shove into coal power plants and produce power. Now, this is where I encountered a bug, I think. I'm almost positive this is a bug. This should have worked. It would be ridiculous if this didn't work in the full game. But what happened was whenever I sent my truck over to pick up the coal, it wouldn't grab it. It treated it as fuel and not as a movable resource. So it would take in the coal to fuel itself so it could keep running, but it wouldn't put any in its inventory. So I ended up having to manually move all that coal from the mine across the map over to my main base just to get power working. Now, like I said, that has to be a bug. Surely that is not how the game is intended to be played. That would be ridiculous. But it's worth noting that that's what happened to me. So speaking of the map, it's set. It's not procedurally generated at all, which I suppose, you know, has its ups and downs. The downside is replayability could be limited. Now, make no mistake, the map is big, and I think it's big enough that you gotta get a decent amount of replay value out of it. But again, compared to something like Factorio, it is limited because Factorio, you know, you can procedurally generate the map, and the map generation is just getting better and better. The latest update is huge in my opinion, and I've gotten some really interesting maps to play with, and it just makes me more excited to play that game. Now, Satisfactory is a different game. Again, we need to remind ourselves it's a different game. It's not 3D Factorio. It's similar, it's perhaps in the same genre, it's tackling it from a different angle. So it's a set map. There are 3 starting areas within that map: the grassy, plains, hilly, whatever, the desert, and the jungle, I think. So while this alpha only gave you access to the first starting area, you could manually travel to the other starting area. So I did go on a little bit of a journey to the jungle and the desert and whatnot. I don't think I found the proper desert. I think the map might be bigger than it appears, but it's also really, it's kind of windy, and there's a lot of like floating island sections and bottomless pits and whatnot. I feel like there will be a decent amount of replay value there. So honestly, while I would prefer a procedurally generated map, I'm not too down on the set map because it is big and it is varied, and that's pretty cool. It's also worth noting that my friend and I, even though we started in the same starting area, we came down in different sections of that starting area. So maybe there is a little bit of randomization in exactly where you drop down. So with no further gilding the lily, let's finish up with some positives. So it wasn't all bad. Even in my single player game that I didn't really enjoy a great deal, there were things that I liked. And I kind of thought to myself, I wish this was an option in Factorio. So the first structure you build in Satisfactory is the hub, and this functions as your research center and your crafting bench. And as you go through the different tiers of research, the hub will visually upgrade. You get a nice little inside area with a couple of bunk beds and a bathroom and some lockers that don't work, but it's nice. It feels like home. You got a nice little desk in there. I kind of, you know, it was just a small thing, but I really liked that concept. It grounded me to my base and made me feel like, yes, this is home. That's one thing that I think is missing a little bit from Factorio inherently, is that you've got no, this is home base, you know. You can build it, make no mistake, and that's what I usually do. I usually have a train yard with a mall, which is producing components that I use most often manually, and I call that my home base. I heavily defend it. It's nice. But Satisfactory gives you that by default, and it's, you know, it feels cozy. It gives you that vibe of building a cubby house as a kid, which Listen, nostalgia baby, I'm into that sort of thing. Additionally, as a whole, Satisfactory is much smaller scale, which I kind of liked. It's a nice change, it's a refreshing change from the likes of Factorio, which is huge scale. So for example, in Satisfactory, you only build one mining structure per resource node. It's simple, straightforward, and I enjoy that concept a great deal. C node, build mine, you're done, kid. And it's things like that that I think is going to be the reason I come back to Satisfactory, not as a replacement to Factorio, because it's not. It's a different enough game that they can both coexist. I think unfortunately some people who are really into Factorio, that were hoping that this is going to be Factorio 3D, might be a little bit disappointed if they were expecting a carbon copy. However, if you really like Factorio and you want a little bit of a different experience, a smaller scale experience that allows you to do some interesting things like build really dense structures vertically rather than just sprawling across the map, I think you might have fun with this. Furthermore, if you really like the concept of games like Factorio, but you just can't get into it, this might be the answer. For example, my buddy Clugs refuses to play Factorio with me, but if he could be conned and persuaded into playing Satisfactory, listen, it's a gateway drug, and he's gonna get the efficiency bug. He's gonna get it, buddy, and then I've got him. Alright, now I want to hear from you. Did you get into the Satisfactory Alpha? What'd you think about it? You a fan of Factorio? How does it compare? Let me know in the comments, baby. But for the moment, thank you very much for watching. Taste the game, be excellent to each other, and I'll see you next time. Ricky Summer, out.